Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday. This is Seattle Now.
I think that Washington should have a higher EV sales share than California.
Recently, Washington lawmakers passed a bill that might help the state get there. It makes buying more brands of electric vehicles easier, just as the federal government has eliminated incentives. We'll talk about the new law and the landscape of EV ownership in Washington in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Bill signings continue this week for Governor Bob Ferguson. Today, he'll put pen to paper on legislation related to law enforcement. One bill bans law enforcement from wearing masks when interacting with the public, and another bans people from using fake badges to impersonate officers. The governor's signing both into law at El Centro de la Raza in Seattle at 11 this morning. Army officials say there are no plans to close the Lewis Army Museum at Joint Base Lewis-McChord. Questions about the museum's future came up last summer when the Center for Military History announced that it planned to close 17 museums throughout the country. The Olympian newspaper reports Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland pressed Army officials for answers in June. Recently, she heard back that the museum will remain open. And Seattle ranks number 3 in the nation when it comes to AI growth, according to the listing service Co-working Cafe, behind San Jose and New York City. According to Geekwire, the report measured 300 cities and looked at employment, salaries, and job concentration. The report also found that average AI pay is nearly $170,000 in the Seattle area. We're back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. Washington state drivers love their electric vehicles. There are more than 138,000 registered EVs in King County, according to the Department of Transportation.
Washington is the best state in the entire country for EV ownership. Because our electricity is so relatively cheap and clean, it's almost all hydropower from the Columbia.
That's Scott Case. He's the CEO and founder of Recurrent. It's a Seattle-based startup focused on helping EV buyers understand what they're getting into, particularly battery life. With gas prices up right now, he says EVs make extra mathematical sense.
So let's say you live in Seattle and you drive 50 miles a day. If you are in a gas car, buying gas, just sort of average fuel efficiency, between gas costs and maintenance costs, you're probably looking at $350 a month of sort of fuel and maintenance.
He says costs for an electric car would be at least $200 less a month.
And what is crazy now is used electric cars are less expensive than the equivalent used combustion engine car.
Chargers can be harder to find than gas stations. Still, Scott says Washington's ratio of one fast charger for every 27 EVs is a decent ratio for road trips. And Washington just made EV buying a little easier. The state legislature passed a bill freeing up direct consumer sales for 2 EV sellers, a market previously dominated by Tesla. It's all part of a larger state push towards EVs, even as the federal government encourages the use of combustion engines. Geekwire reporter Lisa Stiffler is here to explain what's happening. Really appreciate you taking the time, Lisa. Thanks.
Yeah, really happy to be here.
Okay, so within the next 90 days, people here in Washington will have 2 new electric vehicle buying options besides Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. Let's talk about why Tesla has been the only in-state option for so long.
The law has required that automakers sell their vehicles through dealerships, through franchise dealerships all across the state. And Tesla, really being out in front with EVs, got a special deal cut for them. It was an exemption that allows them to sell directly to consumers. They realized that they weren't going to be able to be successful selling through dealerships. These dealerships had been around for decades, selling internal combustion engine vehicles. They didn't understand EVs. They weren't going to push EVs. They're a very different kind of car. And so Tesla said, hey, we need to be able to do this directly ourselves because we understand these vehicles and we know how to maintain them as well. And so they went to the legislature. They were successful in lobbying for this special carve out just for themselves. This happened in other states as well. And so in 2014, they started selling directly to consumers in Washington. And since then, Rivian has really grown up, Lucid has grown up, and they wanted the same kind of deal. I mean, technically, they could have gone to dealerships and sold the traditional way, but they also wanted to be able to do the direct sales. And so they've been lobbying, but they weren't able to break through.
All right. Well, what changed to help the legislature pass the law this year?
The really big change is that Rivian came out in front in December and said, hey, we're going to put this before the voters. We're going to have a ballot measure come fall. If they had to get all the signatures, of course, to make that happen, but they were ready to pony up $20 million to get there. And I think that the dealerships finally realized, if this goes to voters, we're not going to win. The shoppers, they want to be able to buy the car wherever they can. And so they, I believe, recognized that they had a better shot at influencing the language if they dealt with this in the legislature versus a ballot measure. And so the local dealerships came to the table. It was kind of wild hearing them testify in favor of this after so many years of them saying this just couldn't happen, that you couldn't open the door to other automakers to this sort of situation. And what was interesting too was the national automakers, they did testify against it because they're seeing the potential for a slippery slope where these cheaper cars from BYD, for example, from China could come in, other new EV makers could come in, and as the trend goes towards EV sales, they could become obsolete.
Let's say I'm in the market to buy an EV after this takes effect. How is this going to change things for me?
Well, the Rivian and Lucid dealers will be able to have a regular showroom like any other car maker has. It's been funny, at University Village in Seattle, you had the Tesla showroom, and then you had a Rivian Space and a Lucid Studio. And you could go into those places and you could sit in a car, you could look at them, but you couldn't drive them, you couldn't buy them, you couldn't discuss financing. Now you'll be able to go in to these different automakers' showrooms and actually buy a car.
Oh, they'll take you into the back room and give you the tissue deal on the vehicle if you just sign here.
Exactly. All that wheeling and dealing can happen in person now. Because previously in Washington, consumers would have to go to another state, maybe Oregon, for example, where you could buy the vehicles directly, or they had to buy them online and have them shipped or delivered to them.
Okay, that is a big change. Does anything else in the new law encourage more EV sales? Washington is so EV forward, Lisa.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the reason we are is because we've joined California in committing to sell only new EVs by 2035. And right now we're at about 20% a year. We're not very close to 100%. And so one of the ways the state has been trying to incentivize EV sales is by reaching to lower income consumers. So in 2024, they had the Washington EV Instant Rebate Program. That was a $40 million pot of money that they issued to qualifying shoppers to buy or lease new and used EVs, but they ran out of money really fast. That was super successful. So the new legislation has a provision that increases a fee that you pay to get your certificate of title. And so that goes from $15 up to $40. A portion of that money, 35%, goes to an EV account that's sort of similar to that previous program, and that helps lower income people purchase an EV or lease an EV. And then 65% of that additional money goes to this multimodal transportation account. So that pays for mass transit, rail, ferries, bikes, pedestrians, that sort of thing. And that increased fee that went from $15 to $40 runs from October until 2036.
Last summer, the federal government rolled back the federal EV tax credit. How has Washington reacted to that move towards gas vehicles?
Shoppers in the state saw that window closing and they rushed to buy EVs and lease them before that went away. So the state hit an all-time high where 25.5% of all light-duty vehicles purchased in the state were EVs. On average, the state was selling 20% of EVs every year were new vehicles sold. That has dropped to 10%.
I mentioned at the top there the about 138,000 electric vehicles registered in King County. Is that reflective of the state? Is King County an outlier?
It's definitely an outlier. You look more rural. They're just not adopting them in the same way. Part of it is because the vehicles have gotten rather political. There's also less charging infrastructure available, so that's kind of tricky. It's definitely gone up, though. In Washington state, we're up to almost 2,000 DC fast chargers around this state, and plans for more to be deployed with state and federal funds, and just private interests realizing that there's money to be made, because even as the sales are kind of plateauing, there's a lot of EVs out there. Interest in used EVs are going up as well, so that's kind of an interesting trend. That could kind of help keep things going, certainly.
It's funny because new EVs can be really expensive. Let's talk a little bit about how people should think about maybe buying used EVs as an option.
They can be a terrific deal. I bought a used Mustang last year, and I love it so much. It's really cool. And it's performing well. I'm really happy.
You had a little bit of a learning curve, though. I remember you wrote a piece about your EV road trip. Before we move on, I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Oh my gosh, we made the dumbest rookie mistakes. We didn't charge the car as much as we should have leaving, because you're not supposed to charge it more than 80% to help maintain the battery. So we followed those rules, but then of course we get on the road and realize that it's mostly slow chargers out there. And so we finally found a Tesla charger, plugged in our car, super excited. We were on a trip to Portland at Christmas time. Could not get it to unplug. And it's like, we just kept making mistakes. It was so stupid. And we didn't have our own charging cable. So I had a lot of lessons learned. I just wanted to pretend it would be as easy as a gas car. And now it is. Now that I understand the rhythm of it and the charging and where to go and which apps to use, I was self-inflicted.
Well, thanks for enlightening our listeners about it, because there is a bit of a learning curve, but still, legislators really wanted to encourage EV ownership. Lisa, what else did legislators consider related to EVs this session?
Well, one bill that didn't get very far, but struck me as really interesting, was an effort to try to address the theft of EV charging cables. That's really been a huge problem, particularly in urban areas. I can't drive anywhere without seeing some out of service, public fast chargers, because thieves want the copper that are contained in these cables. And so they sever them and then sell them for the metal included inside of them. And so there was an effort to at least start the conversation around what you can do, whether they're technology fixes or maybe, prosecution could change, or going after the scrap metal places that accept the materials. But it didn't get very far. There was, of course, a lot on their table this year, with taxes and other concerns. So maybe next year.
You just mentioned a little bit about the learning curve of getting an EV. I'm sure it feels good right now, though, with gas prices above $5 a gallon in the state. Washington already had high gas prices. Do you anticipate EVs gaining a little more traction for Washington buyers given what's happening with gas prices right now?
Yeah, there has definitely been a trend in that direction in the past. There was some great reporting from Bloomberg that found historically that when it went up above about $4 per gallon when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, that there was slightly lagging, but there was an uptick in interest in EVs. Some people suspect that in such close succession, the 2022 event and now this in 2026, people are going to start feeling more anxiety about it and realize that maybe that fuel source is less secure, less reliable. And those are big hits to your pocketbook when it's $5 or more a gallon. That's what AAA said Washington is right now. It's $5 per gallon on average. We're right behind California. They're at $5.50. So that's a big expense, especially for bigger vehicles that really suck up the gas.
Yeah, I'm definitely reconsidering driving places every time I have to fill up my tank. Really appreciate you taking the time. Geekwire reporter Lisa Stiffler, thanks.
Thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate the time.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for your financial support. Take a minute to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Andy Hurst. Our production team also includes Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, Vaughn Jones, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.